Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel. I'm a general physician. I'm not an endocrinologist. I'll try to make this topic as simple as possible. So today we are going to start with another endocrine structure, endocrine gland, that is thyroid gland. So today we'll be talking on just highlighting what is thyroid gland, what are the different functions, etc. So this is the thyroid gland, which is situated in front of the neck. It is situated in front of trachea. It has got two lobes. The central part is called isthmus, and this small projection is called pyramidal lobe. So little about of anatomy, little of hormone, how it is synthesized, regulation, the functions of those hormones, then examination, how you examine, and investigations. We'll be talking separately on investigation in detail in separate lectures. And approach to goiter also we'll be talking separately in another separate lecture. So as far as anatomy is concerned, we know that it is consisting of two lobes, and central part we call isthmus, and this is a pyramidal lobe, a small projection called pyramidal lobe, and it weighs about 15 to 20 grams totally. And relation, all the different relation we'll be showing you as we proceed. Site wise, you know, it is in front of the neck. We can call anterior to trachea. Isthmus is anterior to trachea, and the two lobes are on the two sides of the trachea. In front of the lower part of the neck. Shape, it is described as a butterfly shape. The central part is isthmus, and on the two sides we call two lobes. So that is the shape of the thyroid gland. Yes, it is a brownish red color, butterfly shape. You can call H shape or U shape. These are the two lobes, and this central connection is called isthmus. This is called isthmus. These are two lobes on the two sides, right lobe and left lobe, and this is called pyramidal lobe. It is anterior to the lower part of the neck. It is from the level of fifth cervical vertebra till first thoracic vertebra. Two lobes are connected by isthmus, and there is a small projection of the isthmus we call as a pyramidal lobe. It weighs between 15 to 20 gram. The dimension are 2.5 by 2.5 by 4 approximately, and connecting part of isthmus is about 0.5 by 2 by 2 centimeter. Parathyroid glands lies on the posterior side of the thyroid gland, and there are two on the each side, upper and lower parathyroid gland. As far as the arterial supply is concerned, it is from superior thyroid artery and inferior thyroid artery. A superior thyroid artery and inferior thyroid artery. Superior is from external carotid, while inferior thyroid is from subclavian. While venous drainage is into the superior thyroid vein from superior lobe, middle thyroid vein drains the lateral part, and inferior thyroid drains the inferior pole of thyroid gland. This superior thyroid artery drains into internal jugular, while superior and inferior thyroid vein drains into internal jugular, while inferior thyroid will drain into what we call as a brachiocephalic vein. Brachiocephalic vein. And lymphatic drainage is into prelaryngeal, pretracheal, paratracheal, cervical, and sometime into brachiocephalic lymph nodes. As it is developed from what we call as a brachial pouches. Now you can have a thyroid gland tissue in the tongue, posterior 1/3 of the tongue, we call lingual thyroid. And when it is below the tongue, we call it a sublingular, or we call suprahyoid. And that is usually in the form of a cyst. So it is also called as a suprahyoid thyroglossal cyst. And you can have a tract from that up to thyroglossal cyst. And you can have an ectopic thyroid gland, a lower down into mediastinum, behind the sternum. So it is called retrosternal, or we call thoracic ectopic thyroid tissue. So you can have a lingular, you can have intralingular, you can have below the tongue sublingular, you can have in the form of a thyroglossal cyst, and thyroglossal cyst can be right from here till this particular level, anywhere in this tract, anywhere in this area. And if it extends below the neck, it is retrosternal or in the mediastinum. Histology wise, it is made up of multiple follicles, which we call as a spherical structure. And this spherical structure consists of follicular cells. These are all follicular cells. In the center part, we have got a colloid. And there are some cells we call as a parafollicular cells, which are outside the follicle. This we call as a C cells. So this C cell secretes, this parafollicular cell secretes calcitonin, while these follicular cells manufactures thyroxine, T3 and T4. And this colloid takes part in synthesis. This is a lumen which is filled with colloid. And these are C cells. These are follicular cells. And these are capillary network. And this is a capsule of thyroid gland. Parafollicular cell secretes calcitonin, and it is separated by connective tissue. And colloid is consisting of only iodinated thyroglobulin, and this thyroglobulin takes part in synthesis and release of thyroxine. In hormogenesis, means formation of iron, first iodine is taken up from blood. So there is a trapping of iodine. This iodine is oxidated. Oxidation of iodine takes place to iodine by thyroid peroxidase, by this thyroid peroxidase enzyme. And it is incorporated of iodine into thyroglobulin. So thyroglobulin will combine with iodine, and you will have a formation of monoiodotyrosine, diiodotyrosine, two compounds. One mono and one di combine to become T3, and two molecules of diiodotyrosine becomes T4. And this particular will be released into blood circulation on stimulus. So it remains combined with thyroglobulin till there is a stimulus, and it will be released into bloodstream. That is T4 and T3, tetraido and a triiodotyrosine. Triiodothyronine, that is T3, is only 10% from the thyroid gland. You get only 10% of that from the thyroid gland, while 90% is T4. That T4 will be converted into T3. So 90% of T3 is derived from T4 by conversion of T4 into T3. So T4 is exclusively only from thyroid gland. You don't get any other area where you get a formation of T4. From thyroid gland, 80% of the hormone is T4 and 20% is T3. So T3 secretion from thyroid gland is only 20%, and that will be accounting for what we call as 10% of total thyroid gland secretions, and 90% of that will be from conversion of the T4 to T3. So that is how it is there. So indirectly we say 80% of the hormone secreted is T4. We almost say 90%, and 10% is T3. And that T4 will be converted into 90% of T3 will be derived from T3 formation from T4. So indirectly 90% is derived from T4. Monoiodotyrosine is also called MIT. Diiodotyrosine is called DIT. Triiodo is T3, and half-life of that is 6 hours. While T4 half-life, tetraiodo, is almost 7 days. So it remains in blood for a longer period, while T3 remains for a shorter period. This will be broken down by deiodase enzyme, and you will get formation of reverse T3, which is metabolically inactive. So during metabolism, this T3 and T4 will be converted into reverse T3. So if we take a figure like this, T4 is bound to protein, that is thyroid bound globulin, thyroid prealbumin, and albumin. Almost 99.9%. So only 0.1% is free in the blood, and that will be converted into T3. While T3, 99.5% is bound to TBG, TPA, and TA. So indirectly active form of T3 is only 0.5%. So bound hormones are inactive and should not be measured. Only free T4 and free T3 are metabolically active. But T4 has to be converted into T3, and then it will be active. And then it will act on all different peripheral tissues. So you get only 0.5% of T3 being active, and as far as T4 is concerned, 0.1% only is active. Thyroid hormone in the blood, approximately, we have already told you, 99.9% is bound to 3 serum protein, that is TBG. Almost 75% is bound to TBG. To prealbumin is 20%, and to albumin it is only 5 to 10%. So fluctuation of globulin, TBG, will make lot of difference as far as free T4 and T3 is concerned. And you can see that only 0.02% of total T4 is unbound or free, which is active, and that will be converted into T3. Only 0.4% of total, we say roughly 0.5% of total T3 is free, which is active. So increase in TBG, any factor which increases in thyroid bound globulin, will decrease free T3, T4 in blood. Classical example, during pregnancy, person who is on oral contraceptive pill, the female who is on hormone replacement therapy, or a person who has got a liver disease in the early stage, or person who is getting tamoxifen. But most common during pregnancy, oral contraceptive pill, hormone replacement, and liver disorders. So in this condition, the TBG is increased. While person who is on anabolic steroids and late stage of liver disease, TBG will be reduced. Or sometimes you can have a competition, we call binding site competition, by NSAID, furosemide, and anticonvulsant drugs like phenytoin or carbamazepine. And this condition also, TBG can be abnormal, because these particular compounds will compete at the site and will not allow the T3, T4 to be attached to that particular site, and that will give rise to abnormal level of T3, T4. So as far as thyroxine catabolism is concerned, T4 will be by enzyme called deiodinase enzyme will be converted into thyronine directly, that is one way, or will be in liver. In liver, deiodinase enzyme will be conjugating in the liver and hydrolyze, reabsorb and thrown out in bile. Or T4 is converted into T3 by deiodinase 1 and 2, and this is active form. This is active form, which will be further converted by deiodinase enzyme into DIT and MIT, and that will be finally converted into thyrone. Also in liver, this T3 will be conjugated, will be hydrolyzed, or maybe reabsorbed or excreted out in bile. Or it is T4 is converted into reverse T3, and that can be deiodinase enzyme will further convert that. This is an inactive, this is active compound, this is inactive compound, and that will be by deiodinase enzyme again will be converted into DIT and MIT. Now conversion from thyroxine, that is T4, into reverse T3 is by deiodinase 3 enzyme. So this is what we call as a metabolism. So it is metabolized by deiodinase enzyme into T3 and by 3 deiodinase 3 into reverse T3, and then finally again it is converted to DIT and MIT, which are thyrone, and T4 can be also directly converted into thyrone by deiodinase enzyme. So T4 can be converted by 4 steps: direct, deiodinase 3, deiodinase 1 and 2. So direct conversion, T3 conversion, reverse T3 conversion, and by liver, and can be excreted out in a bile. So that is how it is working. So this is same diagram shown that the TSH will stimulate the thyroid gland to release T3 T4, and that T3 T4 circulates and can give rise to negative feedback at the level of anterior pituitary or at the level of thyroid, at the level of hypothalamus. This is called long loop, this is called short loop, and it will pass through liver and will be converted into what we call as conjugated, hydrolyzed and reabsorbed or excreted out into bile, and in during this particular circulation in a blood by deiodinase enzyme can be converted into T3 active compound, by deiodinase 3 into reverse T3 which is inactive compound, and these two compound can be further converted into DIT and MIT by deiodinase enzyme, or T4 can be directly converted into thyrone. So this is the metabolism of thyroxine, or we call tetraiodothyroxine. As far as regulation is concerned, hypothalamus manufactures TRH, we call thyrotropic releasing hormone, which will be acting on a pituitary gland in anterior pituitary, and in anterior pituitary it will be acting on what we call as basophilic cells and will be releasing TSH hormone, and this TSH hormone is called thyroid stimulating hormone, which will stimulate the thyroid gland, will increase the uptake of iodine, will manufacture T3 as well as T4. Only 10% of the T3 is manufactured and released by thyroid gland. 90% of the T3 is derived from conversion of a T4 into T3. That T4 and T3 will circulate in the blood. T3 will be acting on a what we call as a peripheral tissue and will give rise to the effect. So finally we have already done the metabolism. So depending upon the level of T3 and T4, it will either inhibit at the level of pituitary, we call short loop, or it will inhibit at the level of the hypothalamus, we call long loop. So if the level of T3 T4 becomes high, it will inhibit TSH as well as TRH, and this is called negative feedback mechanism. So that will be that particular. While hypothalamus can be stimulated by hypoglycemia, hypothermia, mental and physical stress, exercise, etc. All those factors can stimulate the hypothalamus to release TRH, and that TRH will stimulate pituitary gland to release TSH, and that will stimulate thyroid gland to produce T3 as well as T4. So it is also called as a stress hormone. So there will be good number of stimulus which will stimulate hypothalamus to release TRH, and that TRH will act on a pituitary to release TSH. TSH will act on a thyroid gland to release T4 and T3. T4 will be converted into T3, and that T3 will be active and it will be acting on a peripheral tissue, or we call target tissue, that is heart, liver, bone, brain, kidney, genital tracts, ovaries, testes, etc. All these structures, we say that everything from the head till toe will be acted upon by that, and the level of T3 and T4 will have negative feedback. Short lobe pituitary gland, long lobe hypothalamus. Now there are some factors which will be affecting TSH secretion. Say dopamine, glucocorticoids and cytokines will decrease the TSH secretions. Dopamine is indirectly called prolactin inhibiting hormone. So dopamine will inhibit the TSH secretion, as well as glucocorticoid also will inhibit the TSH secretions. Lithium, amiodarone and iodine. Iodine will block TSH secretions by what we call as Wolff-Chaikoff effects. And amiodarone and lithium can also decrease the TSH secretion. So these two are the main important factors which will decrease the TSH secretions. While increase in the thyroid hormone secretion can be there by lithium as well as iodine, can increase the thyroid hormone secretion, that is from thyroid gland, and this is TSH secretion, decrease thyroid hormone secretions by decreasing the thyroid hormone production. So iodine can block as well as increase, and increase is called Jod-Bezdos effect. Thyroid hormone can be displaced from protein by means of furosemide, salicylates or NSAID by competitive inhibition. There can be increased hepatic metabolism by competition, that is rifampicin, barbiturate and phenytoin sodium. So rifampicin, phenytoin can decrease the level of what we call as a T3, T4. Impaired T3, T4 to T3 conversion can be by beta antagonist and radioactive dye, radio contrast media. So whenever a person gives a radio contrast media, T3 conversion will be poor. So you can have a lack of T3 hormone. And impaired absorption of thyroxine can take place in presence of calcium, antacids, soya proteins, iron, B complex, food, etc. So thyroxine has to be given on an empty stomach. And thyroid hormone action can be modified by amiodarone. So these are all the factors which can increase or decrease the action of thyroid hormone, or decrease or increase the secretion of thyroid secretion, TSH secretions. So decreased T3 and T4 and low body temperature, that is hypothermia, can increase the production of TRH, which will increase TSH and which will have effect on thyroid gland. So TRH will have effect on anterior lobe, will secrete TSH, which will have effect on the thyroid gland, and you will have increased production of T3, T4, and will try to maintain your body temperature and normalize T3, T4 level. So this is one of the most common. Also, you can have a stimulus by somatostatin will inhibit, dopamine will also inhibit, cortisol will also inhibit, iodine will block the release of T3, T4 from thyroid gland. hypothermia, stress, hypoglycemia, catecholamine, chronic illness, etc. will stimulate TRH, which will stimulate TSH, and which will finally increase the level of T3T4 in blood. So hypothermia, stress, hypoglycemia, exercise, catecholamine release, and critical illness will try to increase the level of T3T4. While somatostatin, dopamine, and cortisol, these three will inhibit the production of TRH. Iodine will have an effect by two mechanisms. One, it will increase the production of T3T4 and produces what we call as an increased T3T4 level, and that is by dose-based dose effect. While iodine can block the release by the another mechanism. So it can block the release, and it can also stimulate the formation of T3T4 more and release more in a blood. It will depend upon the concentration, how it is given, etc. TRH is produced by hypothalamus. It is by pulsatile secretion and by circadian rhythm, or we call it a diurnal variation. There is a down regulation by T4 and T3. So T3T4 can inhibit by a negative feedback at the level of hypothalamus to decrease the production of TRH. So if the level of T3T4 becomes high, the production of TRH will reduce, and if this level becomes less, TRH production will increase. And it travels by a portal venous system to the anterior pituitary and stimulates the TSH formation. TSH upregulates. TSH secretion is upregulated by TRH and downregulated by T3T4. It travels from the portal venous system into cavernous sinus and then into the bloodstream, and it stimulates the thyroid gland to have an iodine uptake, and it will release, it will stimulate the manufacture of T3T4 and also release T3T4 into blood. There is something called the Wolff-Chaikoff effects. Increased dose of iodine will increase hormone synthesis initially, but further higher dose can cause blockage of hormone formation, and this effect is counteracted by iodine leak from normal thyroid tissue. So initially the hormone synthesis is increased, but a very high dose can block the hormone formation, and you can have an iodine leak from a normal thyroid tissue, and this is called autoregulation. And patient with autoimmune thyroiditis may fail to adopt this particular mechanism and becomes hypothyroid. So in an autoimmune thyroiditis, the person will become hypothyroid because of destruction of thyroid tissue. So this is an autoregulatory mechanism which inhibits the organification in the thyroid gland. So large excess of iodine given acutely, this is very important, large dose and given acutely, a single dose say, results in acute inhibition of thyroid hormone release, and this is called Wolff-Chaikoff effects. And so this is utilized for preoperative preparation in a person of thyrotoxicosis undergoing thyroidectomy, partial or complete. Now this particular, it also inhibits adenyl cyclase enzyme response to TSH and iodination of thyroglobulin. So it will inhibit TSH and there will be no iodination of thyroglobulin. So manufacture of T3T4 will be also reduced, and this will last for 10 days, after which there is something called as an escape phenomena. So once you give that, after 10 days there will be an escape phenomena, and now the thyroid gland will resume its normal function. And this escape phenomena is believed to occur because decreased inorganic ion concentration secondary to downregulation of sodium iodine symporter. So this is escape phenomena. While there is one phenomena called as a Jod-Bezos effect. It is just opposite of a Wolff-Chaikoff effects. Excessive iodine overload induces hyperthyroidism, and this will happen very frequently in Graves' disease, multinodular toxic goiter, or we call toxic multinodular goiter, toxic adenoma. So all these three are hyperfunctioning. These are all three which are hyperfunctioning, and this will lead to symptomatic thyrotoxicosis who receives large dose of iodine, particularly by the means of dietary intake which has increased and which contains good quantity of iodine, or because of radio contrast media usually done for angiographies, or iodine containing medication like amiodarone. So these three are the main common things which can precipitate increase thyrotoxicosis and can lead to thyrotoxic storm. So in a Graves' disease, toxic multinodular goiter, toxic adenoma, all these hyperthyroidism condition, don't give iodine from outside, and see that when you do any procedures, particularly investigative procedures like angiography, urography, etc., cholangiography, in all those radio contrast media are utilized. They contain iodine, and don't use amiodarone. Amiodarone should be used with caution in person with Graves' disease, TMG, toxic multinodular goiter, or toxic adenoma. There is one another compound we call perchlorate. This perchlorate is very important to diagnose Pendred syndrome, in which there is what we call as person has got enzyme defects. This perchlorate ion, ClO4, inhibits sodium and iodine transport protein, because of which individual shows no leak of I-123 after perchlorate treatment, and that is utilized for identifying Pendred syndrome. And in a Pendred syndrome, there is a defect in one enzyme, and that can be easily diagnosed by doing a perchlorate test. So perchlorate test is reserved for diagnosing Pendred syndrome, which is a genetic disorder. Now, as far as what we call as diagnosing different conditions, primary, secondary, and tertiary groups, this is necessary clinical aspect of thyroid hormone. So it is shown that TRH secretions, hypothalamus will secrete TRH, which will be acting on an anterior pituitary gland, and that will stimulate the thyroid gland to release T3T4, and that will act on a peripheral tissue. And this T3T4 can inhibit pituitary gland or hypothalamus by negative feedback. Now, if THS production is more, thyrotropin secretion is more, and there is an hypofunction, so there will be less hormone available for peripheral tissue. If there is already a hypofunction here, this is a better one. This is normal. Hypothalamus releases TRH, pituitary releases TSH, acts on a thyroid gland, releases normal quantity of T3T4. If it is little more, it can have negative feedback to pituitary gland as well as long loop to hypothalamus. Now, if hypothalamus secretes TRH, but there is a defect in a pituitary gland, so TSH is not secreted, then thyroid hormone stimulating antibody will directly stimulate thyroid gland to secrete T3T4, which will inhibit the pituitary gland, and pituitary gland now cannot secrete TSH. So in a person with autoimmune disease where thyroid stimulating antibody is stimulating a thyroid gland producing a thyrotoxicosis, T3 T4 level will be high and TSH level will be low, markedly low. So this is TSH receptor like antibody stimulates the thyroid and massive inhibition of TSH will take place, and so the TSH level will be markedly low. As well as if there is a pituitary problem, so if there is a pituitary disease, no release of TSH, no production of T34, hence you will have a low TSH and low T34. So this is called secondary hypopituitarism, low thyroid release. And if there is a TRH which is not manufactured by hypothalamus, which cannot stimulate the pituitary gland to manufacture TSH, and if TSH is not manufactured, thyroid gland cannot manufacture T34. So in this condition, T34 will be low, TSH will be low, and TRH will be low. So this will be what we call as a tertiary or hypothalamic induced hypothyroidism. This is pituitary induced hypothyroidism. Now they use both together, secondary hypothyroidism, which may be pituitary induced or may be hypothalamic, or also called as central axis defects. Central axis defects. So this is peculiar, this is a negative feedback, this is long loop, and this inhibits thyroid, it is a short loop. So low level of T34 will stimulate anterior pituitary and there will be excess of TSH formation, and that will act on a thyroid gland and will increase the size of thyroid gland also, and that will result in formation of a goiter. So if person has got iodine deficiency, you will have a low formation of T34. Because of low formation, it will go on stimulating anterior pituitary, which will release TSH, which will go on stimulating a thyroid gland, and you will have a goiter formation, hypertrophy of thyroid gland. We call that as a goiter. Same thing can happen with a fluorosis, in a fluorosis. So abnormal catabolism of thyroid gland can take place. Reverse T3 will be high, and fluoride affects the normal deiodinase of T4, and that will be effect of fluorosis. So fluorosis can interfere with formation of what we call as conversion of free T4 into reverse T3. So this particular will be more production, you will have a more production, and that will give rise to what we call as a hypothyroidism. Now T34 hormone has got effect on almost all organs. Eye, brain, it takes part in brain development. Kidney, it increases the GFR. On skin, kidney. On genital organs, ovary, testes. On small intestines and GI tracts, stomach, etc. On liver, on heart, lungs, muscles, and even on bone, and during pregnancy also. And the hormone released by thyroid gland are two groups, T3T4 and calcitonin. T4 will be converted into T3. So 90% of T3 is derived from T4 conversion and 10% is derived from thyroid gland. And almost 99.9% of T4 is attached to TBG, TPA and TA, while T3 attachment is 99.5%. So 0.5% of T3 is free and in an active form. T4 has to be converted into T3 and then it will be active. So we have done all those, and we'll be going through what are the effect on all these different tissue as we bypass. So calcitonin will be the only hormone which will be acting on a bone and having an effect on bone, where it will increase osteoblastic activity and decreases osteoclastic activity, and calcium will be shifted from blood into bone and will help in reducing the calcium level. And it will be also acting on a GI tract by decreasing the calcium and phosphate reabsorption from GI tract. And it will also act on a kidney, where it will increase the excretion of calcium, by which it will try to lower the calcium level, and calcitonin secretion will increase in presence of hypercalcemia. This is how the T3 will be acting. T4 is converted into T3. T3 will enter into the cell. It will stimulate formation of inner nucleus, formation of DNA, which will be converting and producing messenger RNA, and that messenger RNA will now be acting on a different cells. That production of a messenger RNA will be acting on a different cell. The main effect is protein manufacture for growth and maturation. It will also increase the activity of other enzymes for proteins. It will act on a mitochondria, and it will increase oxygen consumption and increases the BMR. It will also activate the sodium pump. So sodium level will increase, and potassium ATPase pump will be also activated. And it will also have a sympathetic effects. And all this will increase your BMR and activity. On a heart, it will increase the cardiac output, it will increase the ventilation. So respiratory rate will be also increased, and that will help in oxygen supply. And by acting at the mitochondria level, oxygen consumption will be increased, and that will increase your body temperature and also increase your BMR. It will increase the food intake, mobilizes the endogenous carbohydrate, protein and fat. So it has got effect on carbohydrate, protein and fat. Because of increased metabolism, increased carbon dioxide production, increases ventilation, increases the breakdown of protein, and final product will be urea. It will increase the renal function. It will shift protein from the muscle in an excessive quantity if it is present. So it will decrease the muscle mass by protein catabolism. But in a normal quantity, it will increase the muscle mass. It will help to increase the muscle mass. Adipose tissue also, it will break down the adipose tissue into free fatty acids in excess. So whenever a person has got excess of T3T4, that is in thyrotoxicosis, you will have a breakdown of the fat, and it will reduce the fat content of the body, and person will have a weight loss. Also it will break down the muscle protein, and it will reduce the muscle mass. But in a normal quantity, it will have constructive effect on a fat and constructive effect on a muscle. But in a lack of thyroid hormone, muscle breakdown will not take place, but the fat deposition will increase, and that will produce obesity, and you can call buffalo hump. So that will be very common, what you will get in a case of a hypothyroidism. And carbohydrate, that is increase glucose level, takes place because of T3T4. It increases neoglucogenesis, glycogenolysis by liver, and that will supply more glucose for all tissue to have an increased metabolism and increase the energy production. But in lack of T3T4, that is in myxedema, less amount of glucose is produced, and that will decrease your BMR, and because of decrease in BMR, person will have a decreased energy, and person will feel lethargy, weakness, fatigue, etc. So in a person with a hyper, more metabolism, more energy, person is having agitation, anxiety, hyper irritable, etc. and person body temperature will be elevated. So this will be effect on the growth. So T3 is acting via nuclear receptors where it induces a new protein generation, that is a messenger RNA, and that messenger RNA will have effect on different functions like growth. It stimulates the growth formation and it helps the growth hormone to increase the growth formation of all tissue, including the bone maturation also. It also takes part in maturation of brain. It increases the BMR by increasing sodium potassium ATPase. It increases the oxygen consumption, heat production, and increases the BMR, and this helps in maintaining your body temperature. As far as the glucose metabolism is concerned, it increases the absorption of glucose from GI tract, so increases the glucose level. It produces glycogenolysis by liver, by which also glucose level is increased. Increases gluconeogenesis by liver, that also increases the glucose level. It breaks down the fat, so lipolysis, free fatty acids, so fat tissue will be reduced. In excess, there will be marked reduction in the fat content. So because of increased glucose level, person can develop hyperglycemia and person can even develop diabetes mellitus. And particularly in a thyrotoxicosis, person will have a hyperglycemia, while in case of a myxedema, person can have a little low level of glucose, we can call hypoglycemia. And it stimulates protein synthesis, and also it will break down protein from muscles. So in excess, it will be a catabolic. In normal level, it is anabolic. And as far as the cardiovascular system is concerned, by release of catecholamines, it will increase cardiac output by increasing the force of contraction, by increasing the heart rate. So it increases the cardiac output. But in excess, it can stimulate the conducting tissue and can produce tachycardia, atrial flutter fibrillation, and can end up with congestive heart failure. So thyroid hormone is required for growth hormone and prolactin production and secretions. So thyroid hormone stimulates for growth hormone and prolactin productions. It is required for growth hormone action. So together with growth hormone, it is producing growth of tissue as well as growth of brain and even a growth of what we call as bones, mineralization of bones. On intestine, it increases the glucose absorption. At a mitochondrial level, ATP production by increasing oxidation of glucose, and ATP production is increased, heat is produced, energy is produced. On adrenal medulla, it increases sympathetic activity, and by increasing sympathetic activity, it will release catecholamines, and by releasing the catecholamines, it will also help in increasing the glucose productions, and also that catecholamine will have an effect on heart. It induces enzyme synthesis and it stimulates the growth of the tissue, increases the metabolic rate, and increases the heat production. So it is called calorogenic effect. So different effects of thyroid hormone. As far as growth and development is concerned, it stimulates the formation of protein by almost all tissue. It increases the growth and maturation of bone with the help of other material like vitamin D, calcitonin, etc. It also takes part in development of the tooth. It increases the growth and maturation of epidermis, that is skin, hair follicles and nails. So it takes part in development of almost all tissue including even brain. As far as the central nervous system is concerned, it is critical for normal neuronal development. It enhances the alertness, wakefulness and alertness. It increases the memory and learning capacity. It also is required for normal emotional tone, and it increases the speed and amplitude of a peripheral nervous reflexes. But in excess, it can produce hyperreflexia. In lack of thyroid hormone, say in a hypothyroidism, it will decrease the tendon reflex, or we call delayed tendon reflex. There will be delayed tendon reflex. On cardiovascular system, by sympathetic or catecholamine release, it increases the heart rate, it increases the force of contraction, so by which it increases the stroke volume, and hence it increases the cardiac output. This is called upregulation. As far as respiratory system is concerned, it stimulates the respiratory center and increases the respiratory rate. It increases the minute ventilation, and thus it will increase ventilatory response to hypercapnia and hypoxia. On kidney, it increases the blood flow and it increases the GFR. On reproductive system, it takes part in development of the reproductive organs and ovulation in female. So in decreased level, you will have a infertility. Required TSH hormone is required for maintenance of pregnancy. So in deficiency of thyroid hormone, it can result into abnormality or complication during pregnancy. And it is also required in male for spermatogenesis. So absence of thyroid hormone or lack of thyroid hormone in male can result into azoospermia and can result into infertility. It also, we have already shown you a calorigenic effect, metabolic effect, so it produces lipolysis, it decreases the plasma cholesterol level, it increases the glucose absorption from GI tract, neoglucogenesis, glycogenolysis, etc. And it increases the insulin breakdown. And because it produces increased insulin breakdown, so that also will decrease the glucose utilization. And that's the reason why you can have an increased level of glucose in blood, and that can produce hyperglycemia. We have already told you on a basal metabolic rate, it increases the sodium potassium pump for energy, ATP production, and increases the synthesis of sodium potassium pump, and that is required for ATP production. So in summary, regulates BMR, increases oxidation in mitochondria, increases activity of adrenal medulla, and thus having increased catecholamine release, and this will have an effect on respiratory system as well as cardiovascular system. Increases the oxygen consumption by all tissue, so increases BMR and increases energy production. It increases the heart rate and force of contraction, thus increases the cardiac output as well as the stroke volume. Protein synthesis is increased, but also it is a protein catabolic, so excess will have a more catabolic effect. It has got effect on carbohydrate and fat metabolism, lipolysis, and in carbohydrate neoglucogenesis and glycogenolysis, and increased absorption from GI tract produces hyperglycemia, so that will be there. It takes part in growth and development of the brain along with other tissues, other hormones. Mainly thyroid hormone is required for the growth of brain. This is the entire effect on a cardiovascular system. Increased thermogenesis, reduced vascular resistance because of vasodilatation, increased inotropic and conotropic effect, so increased cardiac output, and because of the decreased vascular resistance, reduced arterial filling, activation of RAS system, sodium and water retention, increases circulating volume, and increases the cardiac output. On nervous system, we already mentioned. This is reproductive system, we already mentioned before. So this is all what we have mentioned before. All these are again mentioned in a short. Now when you go through a thyroid disorders, you want to evaluate whether the person is having a thyroid disorder or not. History and physical examination is very important. Biochemical test for T3, T4, T3, T4 and TSH level is very, very important. Radiological test is mainly for identifying a thyroid goiter, effect of tumors, thyroid nodule or tumors on surrounding structure, we call compressive effects. FNAC is mainly required to find out the histopathological aspect of thyroid gland tumors or what we call as a goiter. You can have a core biopsy. You can have a laryngoscope examination to find out the compressive effects, etc. And there are certain other biochemical tests to find out the effect of thyroid hormone on body, like lipids level, GTT, renal function test, etc. Liver function test, etc. You can go for all these tests. So history is very important. Clinical examination is very important. So right from neck examination for goiter or nodule, neck lump, lymphadenopathy, symptom signs of thyroid disorders. These are all the different disorders which you can come across: hypo, hyper, euthyroid. You can have a goiter, you can have a smooth goiter, you can have a cystic goiter, you can have a nodular goiter, you can have a solitary, multinodular, you can have a malignant or benign, you can have a radioactive goiter or non-radioactive goiter, high radioactive uptake, low radioactive uptake goiters. You can have inflammation we call thyroiditis, which can be acute, which can be subacute, which can be chronic. You can have autoimmune like Hashimoto's, Riddle's. You can have a Graves' disease. You can have a primary etiology, secondary or tertiary disorders, congenital or acquired. You can have an anatomical position of a thyroid gland like normal position or lingual or intralingual, or we call as the thyroglossal cyst, retrosternal goiter or ectopic thyroid gland, maybe in a normal position, maybe thyroglossal cyst, lingual, ectopic thyroid gland, retrosternal thyroid gland, paraneoplastic tissue secreting thyroid hormones. It can be transient, it can be uh, acquired and maybe persistent. In a person who is a sick, you can have a euthyroid sick syndrome. Same thing is called as a sick euthyroid syndrome, or also you can call as a acute illness thyroid disorders. Because of treatment, you can produce iatrogenic or factitious thyroid disorders, maybe because of drug, maybe because of surgery, or maybe because of radiotherapy. You can have disorders secondary due to antithyroid drugs, hormone replacement therapy, or tissue resistance, etc. Whenever there is a thyroid goiter, you can have hyperthyroid, euthyroid, or hypothyroid. You can have a diffuse goiter or a nodular goiter, which can be solitary or multinodular. It can be non-toxic, it can be toxic. When it is toxic and single nodule, we call toxic solitary nodule. If it is multinodular, we call toxic multinodular goiter. And non-toxic multinodular goiter can be also there. And non-toxic diffuse nodular goiter can be also there. Diffuse goiter, not nodular. Ideally, we should use the word non-toxic diffuse goiter. So these are all the conditions which I've given a preliminary idea in a thyroid, normal thyroid and abnormal thyroid. I hope this lecture will be very useful to you in your future practice.